I'm Alex Thompson. I'm 33 years old, and my own father and brother stole $15 million from me in what they thought was the perfect crime. Before I tell you how I used their greed against them and watched them get arrested in a foreign country without ever raising my voice, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It's comforting to know I'm not just talking into a void. The story begins on a Friday morning that should have been the greatest of my life. I woke up in my old childhood bedroom at my dad's house. The air still carried that familiar scent of old wood, coffee, and something vaguely metallic from his years as a mechanic. Sunlight was pouring through the single window, slicing across a poster of the solar system I'd taped to the wall when I was 10. Everything felt peaceful, full of promise. And why wouldn't it? I had just sold my tech security company, SecureFlow, a venture I had bled for, pouring every ounce of my youth and energy into its success. The sale had made me a wealthy man overnight. Downstairs, tucked away in my father's formidable-looking safe, were 2 duffel bags containing $15 million in cash. It was the down payment for a breathtaking home on the Oregon coast, a home that wasn't just glass and steel, but a testament to the fact that all the struggle, all the ramen noodle dinners, all the 18-hour workdays had finally paid off. I swung my legs out of bed, a real, genuine smile on my face, and headed downstairs, expecting the familiar sound of my dad, Robert, humming off-key while making coffee. He was an early riser, a creature of habit. But the house was silent. Not peaceful silent. It was a dead, unnerving silence that immediately put my senses on high alert. The hair on the back of my neck prickled. "Dad!" I called out, my voice echoing slightly in the stillness. "Michael? You guys up?" Nothing. Just the low hum of the refrigerator. A cold dread, heavy and thick, began to pool in the pit of my stomach. I walked from the kitchen into the living room, and my heart stopped. The massive oak bookcase that always stood flush against the wall, concealing the safe, was pushed aside by about 2 feet. And the thick, circular door of the safe itself, it was wide open, hanging like a broken jaw. My pulse hammered in my ears. I took a few hesitant steps closer, my mind refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. The dark interior was completely empty. The 2 heavy canvas bags were gone. No. My first thought was a burglary. A professional crew must have targeted the house. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers suddenly clumsy and slick with sweat, my mind racing to dial 911. Just as I unlocked the screen, it buzzed violently in my hand. A text message from an unknown number. My gut clenched. I knew who it was from. It was my younger brother, Michael. The message was brutally short. 6 words that felt like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs and the strength from my legs. "Thanks for the money. Don't find us." The phone almost slipped from my grasp. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a professional thief. It was them. My father, the man I'd spent my life trying to make proud. My brother, the boy I'd protected and provided for since we were kids. They had done this to me. For a long moment, the world dissolved into a dull, roaring sound in my ears. The shock was a physical wave of nausea. But as the initial tidal wave of betrayal receded, it left behind something else. Not grief, not yet. It left behind a cold, hard, crystalline clarity. My shaking stopped. My breathing steadied. I looked at the gaping, empty safe, then back down at the cruel text message on my phone. And against all logic, a slow, quiet, chilling smile spread across my face. It was not a smile of joy. It was the grim, terrible smile of a man who knew the final punchline to a joke no one else had heard yet. Calmly, I walked over to the corner where my laptop bag sat. I took out my computer, flipped it open, and logged in. I launched a single, specific program. A satellite map of the world filled the screen. And in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, heading east, a single red dot was blinking. Steady, persistent. They thought they were free. They thought they had won. They had no idea they were nothing more than rats in a maze of my own design. To understand that cold smile, to understand the blinking red dot, you have to understand that the foundation of our family was cracked long before they broke into that safe. You have to go back. We didn't grow up with money. We grew up with the constant, grinding absence of it. Our home was a 2-bedroom apartment in Portland where the walls seemed to sweat during the humid summers. I remember the distinct smell of mildew from a patch of mold in my closet that my dad was always fighting a losing battle against. I remember Christmases where the big gift was a new pair of sneakers because mine had holes in the soles. One year, for my 10th birthday, I desperately wanted a new bike. My dad sat me down at our wobbly kitchen table and explained, his voice thick with a shame that I was too young to understand but old enough to feel, that the transmission on his truck had gone out. There just wasn't any money. He bought me a used book on astronomy instead. I read it until the pages fell out. My mother's departure when I was 8 is a blurry memory. She was a ghost in our lives. A scent of hairspray, the sound of a distant argument, and then nothing. Her absence left a void that my dad, Robert, tried to fill with sheer hard work. He was a mechanic at a local garage, and he became my whole world. He was my hero. He'd come home smelling of gasoline and oil, his hands permanently stained with grease, his face etched with a weariness that seemed bone deep. He never complained. He just worked. He provided. He raised 2 very different sons. I was the quiet, intense one. I saw that astronomy book not as a consolation prize, but as a map to a different universe, a different life. I understood, with a clarity that was almost terrifying for a kid, that my only way out was through my own mind. I studied with a desperate, relentless focus. Michael was the opposite. He was 5 years younger, the baby of the family, and he learned to survive not with books, but with charm. He had a quick smile and an easy laugh that could get him out of trouble or into someone's good graces. Where I was driven, he was relaxed. Where I saved, he spent. Dad was always harder on me, pushing me to get perfect grades, while Michael could get by with a C- and a charming apology. My high school physics teacher, Mr. Harrison, pulled me aside once. "Alex," he said, his kind eyes looking at me over his glasses. "You have a fire in you, but you work like you're running from something." He was right. I was running from the future I saw in my father's exhausted eyes. A full academic scholarship to MIT was my escape hatch. It was everything. But even in Boston, I couldn't escape the pull of home. I worked 2 jobs, one in the campus library, another delivering pizzas, not just for myself but to wire money back to Portland every month. Michael had flamed out of community college after a single semester. He was drifting between low-wage jobs, and there was always an emergency. Rent was late, the car broke down, an unexpected bill. I always sent the money. No questions asked. He was my brother. It's what you do. After college, I got a foothold in the tech world. A few years later, I took the biggest gamble of my life and started my own cybersecurity firm, SecureFlow. The early years were a special kind of hell. I lived in a tiny apartment that always smelled like stale pizza, sharing it with roommates to save on rent. I worked 18-hour days, fueled by caffeine and the terror of failure. I poured every penny I had, and many I didn't, into the company, maxing out credit cards and taking personal loans. The one constant, the one anchor in that storm was Emily. I met her at a coffee shop near campus in my senior year. She was studying environmental engineering, and she had this calm, steady presence that grounded my chaotic energy. She was smarter than me and kinder. She saw the dream behind my exhausted eyes. When I was on the verge of bankruptcy, when I was ready to throw in the towel, she was the one who would show up at my tiny office at midnight with a hot meal and an unwavering belief that I could do it. She was my partner, my home. When SecureFlow finally landed its first major contract, the relief was so overwhelming I nearly collapsed. As the company grew, my first priority was fixing the problems back home. I bought my dad that 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburb, the kind of place with a lawn and a garage he could putter around in. I paid off his mortgage, his medical bills, and set him up with an allowance that meant he could finally hang up his coveralls for good. For Michael, the help was a constant stream. I paid for a real estate course, then a web design boot camp. I gave him the capital to start a small business which folded within a year. Each time he'd come back with a new plan, a new dream, his hand out, and I'd fill it. It was easier than arguing. But the dynamic had shifted. I was no longer just the son or the brother. I was the benefactor, and a subtle poison began to seep into our relationships. Sunday dinners at Dad's new house started to feel like board meetings where I was the bank. My success wasn't a shared joy. It was a resource to be tapped. My dad's pride seemed mixed with a strange bitterness. "Must be nice," he'd say, looking at my new car. "Not having to worry about a thing." Michael stopped asking for loans and started talking about his share, as if my company's success was a family inheritance he was entitled to. The $30 million acquisition offer felt like a vindication for all my hard work. When I told my family, their reactions were telling. My dad was emotional, yes, but there was an unsettling intensity in his voice. Michael's first words were, "30 million? We're set for life." The word struck me. My dream was that house on the coast, a place of peace, with Emily. When I decided to make the $15 million cash offer, it felt like the final, powerful move to secure that dream. A week before the planned withdrawal, the phone call came from my Uncle William, my dad's brother. They'd had a falling out years ago. "Alex, it's William," he said, his voice rusty. "Heard the news. Hell of a thing. You did good, kid." After a few pleasantries, his tone darkened. "Listen, I'm calling for a reason. Be careful with your father. The word is he's in deep. Real deep. Casino markers, private bookies. It's not good. We're talking 6 figures of debt. Men you don't want to owe money to." The world tilted on its axis. My dad? A gambler? The most frugal man I'd ever known? It seemed impossible. But William sounded deadly serious. That night, I couldn't shake his words. A sick, creeping suspicion took hold. I had installed a state-of-the-art security system at my dad's house a few months prior, web-connected cameras included. I told him it was for his safety. I logged into the system remotely, my heart pounding with a mixture of guilt and dread. I scanned back through the archived footage to my last visit, the previous Sunday. I found it at 12:47 a.m. The footage was from the living room camera. It was grainy infrared, but the figures were unmistakable. It was my father and Michael. They were standing in front of the bookcase that hid the safe. My father was holding a small pry bar. I watched, my blood turning to ice, as he carefully, methodically, showed Michael how to pop the magnetic lock on the custom cabinetry without leaving a mark. They weren't trying to crack the safe itself. They were practicing the entry. It was a rehearsal. A quiet, patient, methodical rehearsal for robbing me blind. I physically recoiled from the screen. A strangled noise caught in my throat. This wasn't a recent idea born of desperation. This was a plan. The pride, the tears, the congratulations. All of it had been a lie, a performance. The image of my hero, my father, teaching his younger son how to steal from his older one, shattered something deep inside me. The grief was swift and brutal, but right behind it came a wave of ice-cold fury. They thought I was a fool. They thought I was the same trusting kid who just wanted his dad's approval. They were wrong. My hands were perfectly steady as I picked up my phone. I didn't even think about calling the police. This was a family matter. A war. And you don't call the cops to plan a war. I called Kyle. "Kyle, it's Alex." His voice was cheerful. "The man of the hour. You all set for the big day?" "We have a problem," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "A change of plans. I need your help with something off the books. Something that requires absolute, total discretion." The cheerfulness vanished from his voice. "Alex, what's going on? You sound wrong." "I can't explain now," I said, my eyes still fixed on the frozen image on my monitor. "Just tell me, how good are your tracking devices?" The next 48 hours were an exercise in cold, calculated deception. I compartmentalized my heart, locking away the grief and betrayal. The only thing I allowed myself to feel was the icy resolve of a man with a singular purpose. My meeting with Kyle took place in what he called the Q branch of his security facility. A sterile, windowless room filled with tech that looked like it belonged in a spy movie. "Okay, Alex, talk to me," he said, leaning against a steel table. His usual easygoing demeanor was gone, replaced by the focused intensity of the former military man he was. "What kind of problem are we talking about? I have reason to believe the money is not safe at its destination," I said, choosing my words carefully. "I believe there will be an attempt to steal it. By my family." Cal didn't flinch. He just nodded slowly, his eyes searching mine. He saw the truth there, the raw pain I was trying to hide. He didn't offer condolences or ask prying questions. He just became a problem solver. "So you don't want to stop it," he stated. "You want to let it happen." "I want to let them think it happened," I corrected. "I need a package that looks and feels like $15 million. And I need to be able to track it anywhere on the globe." He walked over to a locker and pulled out a heavy duffel bag. "Standard transport bag. We'll make another one identical to it." He then pointed to pallets of paper. "This is our training currency. Paper cut to the exact dimensions of US bills. We use it for weight and volume testing." "Perfect," I said, feeling the heft of a stack. It was uncanny. "Here's the key," he said, holding up a tiny, black fleck, smaller than a ladybug. "The TR-300, military-grade GPS tracker. Encrypted signal, 6-month battery, waterproof, shielded against most detectors. We'll sew this into the interior seam of the bag. To find it, they'd have to literally unstitch the entire thing." We spent the next hour working like surgeons. We filled 2 identical duffel bags with the blank paper. On top of every single stack, we placed 1 crisp, authentic $100 bill. It was a crucial detail. If they opened a bag to peek, the first thing they'd see would be real money. It had to be convincing. While we worked, I made another call, this time to my lawyer, Richard Bennett. Richard was in his late 60s, a polished, old-school attorney who had seen everything. "Richard, it's Alex. I'm enacting the contingency plan we discussed." "Understood," he said, his voice a calm baritone. "The escrow account is established. The funds will be transferred to it from your primary account in 1 hour. It will be invisible to any standard financial audit and will require your explicit voice authorization for any withdrawal." "Is the other part of the plan in motion?" "It is," I said. "Richard, once the package is taken, I need you to engage the international PI firm we vetted. No budget limit. I want round-the-clock surveillance. I want a complete record of their movements." "Consider it done, Alex," he said. "Be careful." The hardest part was the final performance. That night, I drove to my dad's house, the decoy bags in the trunk, my stomach churning with a toxic mix of rage and sorrow. My dad and Michael greeted me at the door, their faces masks of forced excitement. Michael's girlfriend, Vanessa, hovered in the background, her eyes missing nothing. She had the unnerving stillness of a predator. "The conquering hero returns," my dad boomed, throwing an arm around my shoulder. The gesture felt hollow, theatrical. "Did you bring it? Is that it?" Michael asked, his eyes practically bulging as he looked at the bags Kyle's guards, Trevor and Marcus, carried in. Dinner was an agonizing charade. I sat at the table I'd eaten at as a boy, listening to the man who raised me and the brother I grew up with spin a web of lies. I had to smile, nod, and pretend I was the same trusting fool they thought I was. "You know, son," my dad said, passing me the mashed potatoes, "I was thinking, when you close on that big house of yours, you should throw a party for the whole family. A real celebration." "Of course, Dad," I said, my voice even. "It wouldn't be a home without family." "Yeah, a real party," Michael slurred, already on his 3rd beer. "We gotta make up for all those years of being poor, right? You're our ticket to the good life, bro." Vanessa placed a perfectly manicured hand on his arm. "What Michael means, Alex, is that we are all just so incredibly proud of your success." Her voice was smooth as silk, but her eyes were cold as glass. She was the one keeping him in line, I realized. She was the brains of this sordid little operation. The moment my dad's phone rang and he scurried into the bedroom for a hushed, frantic conversation, I knew it was the final confirmation. The plan was in its final stages. After dinner, we performed the ritual of locking the money away. I let my dad do the honors of placing the bags inside the safe. "Heavy suckers," he grunted, shoving the second bag in. 15 million ought to be, I replied. I spun the combination dial, the clicks echoing in the quiet room. I gave it a final tug to show it was secure. My dad put his hand on my shoulder. "It's safe with me, son," he said, looking me right in the eye. "I'll guard it with my life." The lie was so bald, so audacious, it almost took my breath away. I just nodded. "I know you will, Dad." I spent the night in my old room, but I didn't sleep a wink. I just lay there, staring into the darkness, listening. The house settled. The whispers started. The floorboards creaked. They were making their final preparations. The next morning I followed the script. I woke up, feigned a slow, easy morning, and then discovered the theft. The theatrical shock. The frantic, faked phone calls. I called Emily first, my voice choked with manufactured despair. "Em, it's gone. It's all gone. My dad, Michael, they took it. They're gone." She was a whirlwind of support and righteous fury on my behalf, her reaction pure and real, which only made my deception feel more bitter. Then the official call. I brought in the local police. Detective James Martinez arrived, a man who looked like he'd seen the worst of humanity twice over. He listened patiently as I wove my tale of the trusting son and the Judas family. "So, Mr. Thompson," he said, his pen poised over his notepad, his eyes giving away nothing. "You're telling me your 65-year-old father and your brother, with no history of serious crime, managed to steal $15 million in cash from a locked safe overnight and disappear?" "I know how it sounds," I said, letting my voice crack, "but it's what happened." "Family disputes over money can get ugly," he said, closing his notepad. "But this is unusual. We'll put out an alert, check the airports, the border crossings. But I'll be honest with you, son. If they planned this well, they could be anywhere." "Just do whatever you can, detective," I whispered. As soon as he was gone, my demeanor shifted. The mask of the victim fell away. I called Richard. "The police report is filed," I said, my voice hard as steel. "They've taken the bait. The tracker is active." Richard's voice came back, all business. "They're on a private charter out of a small airfield in Washington state. Destination: Georgetown, Cayman Islands. The PIS are already spinning up a team on the ground there. Phase 2 has begun." I hung up. There was no joy, no satisfaction. Just the grim certainty of a general who had successfully sent his troops into a battle he knew would be bloody and devastating, even in victory. The hunt was on. The following weeks were a descent into a strange, obsessive twilight. My world shrank to the confines of my apartment and the glow of my laptop screen. I became a ghost in my own life, my only connection to the outside world, the encrypted emails from Carter, the lead PI, and the occasional, professionally detached updates from Detective Martinez. The red dot on the map became my sun and my moon. It moved from the Caymans to Dubai, then to the glittering, amoral playground of Monaco. Carter's team was magnificent. They were invisible, feeding me a steady stream of intelligence that painted a sickeningly vivid picture of my family's new life. The reports were filled with high-resolution photos that felt like punches to the gut. There was my father, Robert, at a baccarat table at the Casino de Monte Carlo. He wasn't the tired, broken man I remembered. He was wearing a tuxedo, a glass of something expensive in his hand, laughing with a woman who couldn't have been older than 30. He looked vibrant, alive, a life bought with my trust. Another report showed Michael. He had rented a yacht for the day. In the photos, he was standing at the helm, shirtless, wearing ridiculously oversized sunglasses and a gold chain that looked thick enough to anchor the boat. He was trying to project an image of power, of a self-made king, but he just looked like a pathetic lottery winner on a vulgar spending spree. Vanessa was there, of course, draped over a lounge chair in a designer bikini, looking bored and proprietary. They were burning through their own funds at an alarming rate, living a lifestyle they thought the bags of cash would sustain forever. They set up anonymous social media accounts to post their exploits, a pathetic attempt to brag to a world that didn't know them. They thought they were taunting me, a ghost from their past. They had no idea I was a hawk circling high above, watching their every move. The strain of this double life began to erode the edges of my world. I lost a major consulting contract because I missed a critical meeting. I stopped returning calls from friends. I was becoming a recluse, a man obsessed. And Emily, my rock, was watching the whole thing with growing horror. She tried to pull me back. She'd insist on cooking dinner, trying to create a pocket of normalcy in our chaotic life. We'd sit at the table and she'd talk about her work, about a new river restoration project, and I'd nod and make the right noises, but my mind was elsewhere, calculating time zones and cross-referencing flight manifests. One evening, I was on a video call with Uncle William. He had become an unlikely confidant. He was the only one in the family who knew the truth about my father's demons. "He borrowed money from me, Alex," William confessed, his face grim on the screen. 10 grand about a year ago. Said it was for a business opportunity. I knew it was for the bookies. I told him no more. I guess you became his new business opportunity." Hearing it confirmed, so bluntly, sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. I was so engrossed in the call that I didn't notice Emily standing in the doorway until I hung up. Her arms were crossed, her face etched with a deep, weary sadness. "That was your uncle, wasn't it?" she asked. "Yeah, just getting some more background." "Background?" she said, her voice quiet but sharp. "Or are you just picking at the wound, Alex? Are you just feeding the anger? I need to understand, Em. I need to know how this happened." "I know you do," she said, stepping into the room. "But I don't think that's what this is anymore. This has become an obsession. It's a hunt. And it's changing you." I stood up, defensive. "What am I supposed to do? Forgive and forget? Let them enjoy their stolen paradise?" "No." Her voice cracked, and I saw tears glistening in her eyes. "I want you to get justice, Alex. You deserve that. But I am terrified of what this pursuit of justice is costing you. It's costing you your soul." She took a shaky breath, her gaze unwavering. "The man I love is kind and brilliant and builds things. He doesn't sit in a dark room tracking his own father like a bounty hunter. He doesn't talk in the same cold, strategic voice as the lawyers he has on retainer. I look at you sometimes, and I see a reflection of their coldness in you, and it terrifies me." Her words were a physical blow. She saw me as cold, manipulative, like them. "I can't watch you do this to yourself," she whispered, the tears finally falling. "I can't watch you win this war if it means losing yourself. I'm going to go stay with my sister in Seattle for a while." My heart plummeted. "Emily, no. Don't. I need you." "No, Alex," she said, her voice firm with heartbreaking resolve. "You need to need yourself again. You need to remember who you were before all this. Please, get the justice you deserve. But then find that man again. The man I fell in love with. And when you do, call me." She walked past me, her shoulder brushing mine, and I didn't have the words to stop her. I stood there, frozen, as I heard the quiet sounds of her packing a bag. The click of the front door closing was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I was alone, utterly and completely alone. I sank onto the couch, the cold glow of the laptop screen illuminating my face. The red dot was blinking over Geneva, Switzerland. I had them cornered. My plan was working perfectly. I was on the verge of victory. But in that moment, sitting in the crushing silence of my empty apartment, having lost the one person who mattered more than any amount of money, it felt exactly like defeat. For the first time, I let myself truly feel the gaping wound of it all. And I had never felt so lost. The 2 days after Emily left were the darkest of my life. The apartment felt less like a home and more like a tomb. The blinking red dot on the screen felt like a mockery. What good was a perfect plan if my life was in ruins? I started to question everything. Maybe I should just call it off. Let them disappear with their worthless paper. Let myself be free of the anger that had become my constant companion. I was spiraling, lost in a fog of self-doubt and grief, when the secure phone Richard had given me buzzed. It was Carter. "Alex, you need to see this," he said, his voice urgent. They're making their move, and they're getting desperate. His words cut through my haze like a searchlight. I forced myself to focus, to push the pain down. I logged into the secure portal. Carter's latest report was waiting. Subject Robert and Subject Michael have made 3 attempts in the last 24 hours to open accounts at private banks in Geneva. The report read, all attempts have failed due to their inability to verify the source of funds. Our internal sources indicate they had a significant argument last night. Michael is panicking. Robert is trying to maintain control. They believe their cash is untraceable and don't understand why the hypersecure Swiss banking system won't touch it. They were trapped. They were sitting on what they believed was a king's ransom. But to the legitimate financial world, it was a radioactive brick. They couldn't deposit it. They couldn't wire it. Their only option was to try and convert it into a physical, high-value asset. And then I saw the update at the bottom of the report. Update. Subjects have scheduled a private appointment for 1500 hours Central European Time at Rousseau's Jewelers on Rue du Rhône. Stated purpose. Viewing of investment-grade colored diamonds. My breath hitched. This was it. The endgame. Rousseau's wasn't just a jewelry store. It was a financial institution that sold diamonds instead of bonds. They were walking into the lion's den. Richard has already been in motion for days, Carter explained over the phone. He's been working with a Swiss legal team. They've already briefed the federal police and the store's corporate security. Everyone is in place. They're expecting a major fraud attempt. They're ready to play their part. The fog of my despair began to burn away, replaced by a surge of adrenaline. This was the final move on the chessboard. I need to see it, Carter, I said, my voice low and steady. Live. I expected him to refuse, but he didn't hesitate. The link will be in your inbox in 5 minutes. You've earned it, Alex. The secure link opened a multi-camera feed of the store's interior. The opulence was staggering. It was a temple of wealth, all polished mahogany, deep velvet, and cases of jewels that glittered with a cold, hard light. At precisely 3:02 p.m. Geneva time, they walked in. My father, Michael, and Vanessa. They looked like tourists who had wandered into the wrong museum. My dad was sweating, dabbing at his forehead with a handkerchief. Michael was trying to project an air of nonchalant power, but his eyes darted around nervously. Vanessa was the only one who seemed composed, her posture perfect, her expression a carefully crafted mask of polite interest. A distinguished, silver-haired manager greeted them and led them to a private viewing room. The camera angle switched. I was looking right at them. I could see the faint tremor in my father's hand as he sat down. The manager, wearing white gloves, began to present trays of diamonds. Brilliant blue, deep green, fiery red stones that were worth more than the house I grew up in. I watched them pretend to inspect the jewels, their faces a poor imitation of connoisseurship. Then Michael, with a theatrical sigh of boredom, reached down and heaved one of the duffel bags onto the table. He unzipped it and pulled out a thick, shrink-wrapped brick of the decoy cash. He dropped it on the velvet tabletop with a solid thud. It was a power move, meant to impress and intimidate. The manager didn't even blink. With a polite, almost imperceptible nod, he picked up the brick of cash. Of course, sir. If you'll excuse me for a moment, I will have this verified. He carried it out of the room to a service counter where a sleek, unassuming machine sat. A high-speed currency counter with integrated counterfeit detection. My heart was pounding against my ribs. I leaned so close to the screen my nose was almost touching it. The manager calmly sliced open the plastic wrap. He removed the top bill, the single real $100 bill, and set it aside. Then he placed the entire stack of blank paper into the machine's feeder. For one excruciating second, the world seemed to hold its breath. The machine whirred for a fraction of a second, then stopped. A small, discreet red light blinked. Error. Invalid. The manager's expression didn't change, but his right hand moved calmly beneath the counter and pressed a button. The silent alarm. In the viewing room, the trio was starting to fidget. My dad was drumming his fingers on the table. Michael was whispering something to Vanessa, who shot him a look that could have frozen fire. Two men in impeccably tailored dark suits emerged from a back office and conferred quietly with the manager. He gestured with his head toward the viewing room. They nodded and began to walk, not with urgency, but with an unnerving, deliberate calm. I watched them enter the room. One of them flipped open a wallet, revealing a badge. "Police Federal," he said, his voice inaudible but his authority absolute. The transformation was breathtaking. Michael's smug arrogance evaporated, replaced by a slack-jawed, idiotic gape of disbelief. Vanessa's cool composure shattered. Her face went as white as a sheet of paper, her eyes wide with pure panic. But my gaze was fixed on my father. He wasn't looking at the police. He was staring at the duffel bag on the table. And in his eyes, a sequence of emotions played out in horrifying succession. Confusion, then denial, then a slow, dawning, catastrophic understanding. He finally got it. The money wasn't just counterfeit. It was nothing. A joke. He had been tricked. He had dragged his family across the world, ruined their lives, for a bag of worthless paper. He physically deflated. The stolen confidence, the gambler's swagger. It all bled out of him, leaving behind a shrunken, pathetic old man. His shoulders slumped in utter, soul-crushing defeat. I watched on the silent feed as they were calmly handcuffed and led out of the store. There was no drama, no shouting match. Just the quiet, irreversible click of a perfectly executed trap. I leaned back in my chair and slowly closed the laptop. There was no elation, no shout of victory, just a deep, profound, and shuddering exhalation of breath. The war was over, and as Emily's words came back to me, I knew I had won in the only way that mattered. I hadn't laid a hand on them. I hadn't even raised my voice. I had simply given them the rope and watched as they fashioned their own noose. The aftermath was a quiet storm of legal paperwork. The chaos was all happening thousands of miles away, filtered down to me through the calm, methodical voice of Richard Bennett and the concise, encrypted reports from Carter. The Swiss legal system, I learned, is a finely tuned, merciless machine when it comes to financial crimes. My family wasn't just facing fraud charges. Their use of high-quality forged passports and their attempts to subvert the banking system had triggered a host of other serious offenses. They were in deep, with no easy way out. They were held in a modern but grim detention center near Geneva. Their worlds shrunk from luxury suites and yachts to a 6-by-9-foot cell. Richard explained their situation to me in a call a week after the arrests. "Their court-appointed defender is overwhelmed," he said. "The evidence is mountainous. The PI firm's documentation of their travel and spending, combined with the testimony from the jeweler and the bank officials, has created an open and shut case. They have no leverage." "What are they saying?" I asked, a flicker of morbid curiosity I couldn't suppress. "Michael is attempting to blame Robert, claiming he was an unwilling participant manipulated by his father. Vanessa is staying silent, likely hoping to cut a deal. And Robert, he's confessed to everything. He seems broken. The image of my father, broken in a foreign jail, should have brought me some satisfaction. Didn't. It just felt pathetic, tragic, a wasted life." "Their lawyer has made a formal inquiry," Richard continued. "He wants to know your position, Alex. As the primary victim, your input carries significant weight. A harsh victim impact statement from you could influence the severity of their sentencing." He paused, letting the weight of the question hang in the air. "Essentially, they want to know if you want your pound of flesh." I thought about it. I thought about the years of feeling like a walking wallet. I thought about the sheer, galling audacity of their betrayal. I could draft a statement that would scorch the earth, that would detail every last slight, every dollar given and every trust broken. I could probably ensure they'd stay behind bars for the maximum possible time. But then, I thought of Emily's face, her eyes pleading with me not to become them. A pound of flesh would tie me to them forever. It would mean I was still in the fight, still defined by my anger. It would be revenge, and I was tired of revenge. I wanted to be free. "No, Richard," I said, and the decision felt instantly right. "No statement." "Are you certain?" "Positive." I said, my voice firm. The Swiss justice system can determine their fate based on the facts. Their actions are the only statement that matters. My part in this is over. I want to be officially disengaged. Making that decision felt like the final, definitive act. It was the moment I truly walked away from the war. I was no longer their victim, nor their opponent. I was just a man who wanted to get on with his life. There was, however, one final piece of unfinished business. It wasn't about punishment. It was about closing the circle. Richard, I said, there is one more thing I need you to do. I need your Swiss colleague to deliver a message for me. A verbal message. To Robert. And only to Robert. What do you want to say? I didn't have to think about it. The words had been sitting in my heart for weeks. Waiting. I want him to tell my father this, I said, my voice quiet but clear. The value of a man isn't in the money he has, but in the integrity he keeps. You've lost both. Richard was silent for a long moment. I could hear the faint sound of him breathing on the other end of the line. I will make sure he gets that message, Alex, he said finally, a note of respect in his voice, word for word. After I hung up, I stood and walked to the large window that overlooked the city. For so long, that view had been nothing but a backdrop to my obsession. Now, for the first time, I saw the lights, the life, the future. My family would face their consequences. The courts would do their work. But I would not be there to watch. I would not be reading the updates. I was letting go. I was choosing to build my own future instead of lingering in the ruins of my past. In the quiet of my apartment, it felt like my first real taste of freedom. The year that followed was a year of deliberate, quiet reconstruction. Not of wealth, but of self. The first casualty of my new life was the downtown apartment. It was a beautiful space, but it was haunted. Every corner held a memory of pacing, of sleepless nights, of the cold glow of a laptop screen. I sold it and all the designer furniture within it. The sleek, minimalist life I thought I wanted suddenly felt cold and sterile. I also let go of the dream of the glass mansion on the coast. That house had been a monument to the wrong kind of success. It was a statement piece, designed to shout to the world, look what the poor kid from the wrong side of town accomplished. I no longer felt the need to shout. Instead, I found a house nestled on 10 acres of old-growth forest about an hour outside of Portland. It wasn't a mansion. It was made of cedar and river stone, with a wide, welcoming porch and a great room with a massive fireplace. Its windows didn't look out over the ocean, but into the deep, calming green of the woods. It was a sanctuary, not a statement. The $15 million sat in the escrow account, a silent, powerful reminder of the chaos. Keeping it felt like keeping a toxic artifact. It was blood money, in a way, stained with the death of my family as I knew it. So I decided to launder it. Not in the way my father had tried, but in the truest sense of the word. I wanted to wash it clean. With Richard's help, I established the Phoenix Fund. We used half the money, $7.5 million, to create an endowment. The fund's mission was simple: to provide full-ride scholarships, housing stipends, and personal mentorship to brilliant kids from impoverished backgrounds who wanted to pursue careers in science and technology. I wanted to give other kids who were running from something a clear path toward a better future. The other half was placed in a conservative trust, its earnings perpetually feeding the foundation. I didn't touch a dime of it for myself. My new consulting business was more than enough. I was selective about my clients, taking on projects that genuinely interested me. The work was fulfilling, but for the first time in my adult life, it wasn't my entire life. I learned to disconnect. I bought a dog, a goofy golden retriever named Hopper. We spent hours hiking the trails behind my house. I read novels. I learned to cook, badly at first, then with growing confidence. I was rediscovering the person I was before the ambition and the betrayal had calcified me. But the silence of the big house was a constant presence. It was a peaceful silence, but a silence nonetheless. It was missing a keynote. It was missing Emily. We hadn't spoken since the day she left. I wanted to respect the space she'd asked for. I had to do the work of finding myself first. One crisp autumn afternoon, about a year after the arrests, I was sitting on my porch, watching Hopper chase squirrels. The air smelled of damp earth and pine. I felt a sense of peace so profound it was almost startling. And I knew with absolute certainty that I was ready. My hand was steady as I dialed her number. She answered on the second ring, her voice cautious. "Hello, I said. "It's Alex." "Alex," she said. I could hear a world of questions in that single word. "How are you?" "I'm good," I said, and the simple words felt momentous, true. "I'm really good." I didn't launch into the story of my victory. I didn't talk about the case at all. I told her about the house. I told her about Hopper. I told her about the Phoenix Fund, my voice cracking slightly when I talked about meeting the first scholarship recipient, a fiercely intelligent young woman from a background even tougher than mine. "You were right, I said, my voice low, looking out at the woods. "You said I was becoming cold like them. And I was. Winning that fight. It didn't fix anything. It just left me empty. The healing, the real peace. It only started when I started building things again. When I started giving, instead of just winning." I took a deep breath. "You told me to call when I found myself again. I think I'm finally here." The silence on her end stretched on, and my heart hammered against my ribs. Maybe it was too little, too late. Then, I heard her soft, wavering voice. That sounds like the man I know. Can you send me the address?" She drove up that Saturday. When she got out of her car, she didn't look at the house first. She looked at me. She searched my eyes for a long moment, and whatever she saw there made her break into the most beautiful, radiant smile I had ever seen. That weekend, we didn't solve everything, but we started. We walked for miles in the woods, Hopper running ahead of us. I told her everything, the coldness I'd felt, the fear that I had lost my own humanity in the pursuit of justice. She listened and she understood. "You bent," she said, slipping her hand into mine. "But you didn't break. You came back, Alex. That's all that matters." Her hand in mine felt like the final piece of a complex puzzle clicking into place. We took it slow. There were more weekend visits, long phone calls. We cooked together in my new kitchen, planted a garden that we were both terrible at tending, and sat for hours on the porch, sometimes talking, sometimes just enjoying the quiet together. We were building something new, on a foundation of honesty and hard-won wisdom. My life wasn't perfect, still had scars, but it was real, and it was mine. The sun is setting now, casting long shadows through the pine trees. From the porch, Emily and I are watching the sky bleed from blue into a soft, bruised purple. Hopper is asleep at my feet, his tail thumping against the wood in a dream. A year ago, a moment of such simple, profound peace would have been unimaginable. My world was a battlefield. Now it's a sanctuary. Emily leans her head on my shoulder, a familiar, comfortable weight. "Do you ever wonder what they're doing right now?" she asks, her voice barely a whisper. I consider the question. I know from a final, formal update from Richard's office months ago that Robert and Michael are serving out their sentences in a Swiss prison. Vanessa, having turned on them for a lighter sentence, is likely already free, a ghost in the wind. But I don't picture their faces. I don't imagine their suffering or their regret. To do so would be to give them space in my head, and I've decided they are no longer entitled to it. Honestly? No, I reply, and I'm surprised by how true it is. I think I finally understand that forgiveness isn't about them. It's not about absolving them or pretending what they did wasn't a monstrous thing. Forgiveness is about me. It's about refusing to let their actions be the defining story of my life. It's about putting down the heavy bag of anger and resentment because I'm the one who has to carry it. I turn to look at her, her face soft in the twilight. "I choose this," I say, my voice thick with emotion. I gesture to the quiet woods, the warm lights of the house, to her face. Instead of choosing to stay tethered to them and their poison, they taught me a brutal lesson about betrayal. But you, and all of this, taught me a much bigger lesson about what's real. The real fortune was never the $15 million. It was the loyalty of a friend like Kyle, who asked no questions. It was the integrity of a lawyer like Richard. It was the love of a woman who saw my best self and waited patiently for him to find his way home. It was the strength to turn a wound into a source of healing for others through the foundation. They tried to take everything from me, but in doing so, they forced me to discover what was truly valuable. They can keep their prison cells and their bitter regret. I'll keep the sunset. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to tell, but I hope it connected with you in some way. We all face betrayal, big or small, in our lives. How we choose to respond is what defines us. Have you ever had to find your way back from a moment that tested you to your core? I would be honored if you would share your own story or your thoughts in the comments below. Your experiences are valuable. And if you found some meaning here, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It means the world. Take care of yourselves.